In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the especially merciful. I'd like to welcome you to this video where I'll be proving through the Bible and from the Bible my reasons to prove that Jesus, peace be upon him, is not the Son of God. And I will use the Bible, the New Testament, and the references to prove that point. The first verse is John 7, verse 16, which says, Jesus answered, "My teaching is not my own, it comes from the one who sent me." Now, the Christians, if they were to claim that Jesus is God, and that the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit are all one and the same beings, and the same in authority, and they're all one and the same, then what does Jesus mean in this verse where he says, "My teaching is not my own, it comes from the one who sent me"? If he is God, who sent him? That is the question. The next verse is John 7, verse 28. Then Jesus, still teaching in the temple courts, cried out, "Yes, you know me, and you know where I am from. I am not here on my own accord, but he who sent me is true. You do not know him." Again, he who sent me. Who sent him? If he is God, who sent him? Is it befitting that God would be sent by someone else above him, or with more authority than him? I demand an answer from the Christians. And I'm not against Christians or Christianity. I actually love the peaceful Christians, because there are some Christians that are so peaceful and so tolerant that it's inspiring to see them. And it's inspiring the devotion that they have to try to help the poor. It's an inspiration. When I see that, I get encouraged to do the same. But there are some Christians, and this is the majority, without a doubt, this is the majority, based on my experience, that they are very bigoted towards Islam and towards other minorities. So I make this video as an intention to prove the reasons why, or to prove that Jesus is not the Son of God, and I do so using the Bible. And there are other verses in the Bible that contradict these verses. I'll be discussing that. Let's continue on. John 7, verse 29. Jesus says, and by the way, I'm reading all the verses Jesus says, where it says Jesus says, or Jesus is talking in that verse. But the vast majority of the Bible is not Jesus talking. The vast majority of the Bible is somebody else. It's a third source. It's not Jesus. How do you know if it's Jesus? If he's talking, it would say Jesus said, or Jesus answered, or he's discussing something, and then you know it's Jesus. There's other verses that says Paul says, and then it goes on and on and on. The vast majority of the Bible is not Jesus, but it seems to be Paul or other people. I'm only using verses that says Jesus said, because if we're going to know what Jesus said and what Jesus really taught, we need to go directly to his words. And that's what I'll be doing in this video. Next verse. John 7, verse 29. It says, But I know him because I am from him, and he sent me. Again, Jesus says, I know him. Who's him? Who? Because I am from him. From who? And he sent me. Who sent you? If you are God, who in the world sent you? How can God be sent by anyone? The next verse. Again, Jesus says, this is in John. The last verse was John 7, verse 29. This verse, John 7, verse 33. It says, Jesus said, I am with you only for a short time, and then I am going to the one who sent me. Again, the one who sent me. Who? If he is God, who sent him? The fact that he keeps saying somebody sent him indicates that he's not God, or he's not in equivalent to God, that there's some significant difference, because if he is God, why would God need to be sent? He would have just said, I came down myself, because, and then he would explain why, or that I came because I wanted to. But he said, I've been sent. Sent by who, if he is God? Who sent him? How can God be sent if he is the Almighty? Who is above him? Next verse, John 8, verse 26. Jesus says, I have much to say to you in judgment of you, but he who sent me is trustworthy, and what I heard from him I tell the world. Again, who sent me? The one who sent me. What I heard from him I tell the world. Heard from him? Who? Who did you hear from if you're God? If I was to say, I am coming to give you a message from myself, from me, and I say, my Father gave me this message to tell you, but you just said that it was you who's coming down to give me the message. Now you're saying it's the Father. So who is it? Next verse, John 8, verse 42. Jesus says to them, if God were your Father, you would love me, for I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Again, he is specifically in this case saying God sent him. But if he is God, why would he have to say, God sent me? If he is God, why does he have to say, God sent me? He should have just said, I am God, and I came for this and this reason. But he specifically mentioned now, specifically says, God sent me, indicating that him and God are not one and the same. Because if he is God, it doesn't make any sense for him to refer to himself in the first person. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for him to refer to himself in the third person. He should have just said, I am God. But he's referring to another being, which is, God sent me. That means somebody else. Next verse, John 8, verse 55. He says, though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I do not, I would be a liar like you. But I know him and obey his word. Who's him? Who? If he is God, why is there two apparent different entities? Apparent two different beings. Why is he differentiating between two beings? He's saying, I know him. Why would God say I know him to himself? Or he say to himself, I obey his word? It doesn't make sense. If I was to say, I obey myself, or I obey my word, or I'm coming down, I'm going to give the message from my Father, and I'm referring to myself, it doesn't make any sense. He specifically said, God sent me. If he is God, why would God say, God sent me? If he is God, why would he say, I know him, you don't know him? If he was God, why would he say, I obey his word? It doesn't make any sense. Next verse, John 7, verse 40. On hearing his words, some of the people said, surely this is a prophet. This is proof of what we say in Islam, which is that the prophet Jesus is a prophet. And now it's proven in the Bible from that verse. Because Jesus heard that they said that, and he did not refute them. He did not debate them. He did not tell them not to say that. He let them say it. Next verse, John 8, verse 44. Now, this verse refers to anyone who claims that Islam is anti-Semitic, against Jews. Well, apparently, according to this verse, Jesus himself was against Jews. He didn't like them. Apparently. It says, you belong to your father the devil. He's debating with the Jews in this context. And he says, you want to carry your father's desires. So anyone who says that Islam is anti-Semitic, remember the verse John 8:44, where Jesus calls the Jews sons of devils. He says, you belong to your father, the devil, implying that the devil is their father and they are the sons of devil, which is a very insulting thing. There are many other verses that would be called anti-Semitic based on Jesus' own words in the Bible. So anyone who says Islam is anti-Semitic, remember John 8:44. And next point regarding that, the term Semitic means Arabs and Jews. So it's impossible for Muslims to be Semitic, anti-Semitic, because we are Semites. We can't be against ourselves. Arabs are Semites. So cut the crap with that. Next verse. John 4, verse 12. No one has ever seen God. Listen to what I just said. John 4, verse 12. No one has ever seen God. But if we love each other, God lives in us, and He loves us. And His love is made complete in us. Again, I'll repeat it one more time. John 4, verse 12. No one has ever seen God. That alone, this verse alone, should be damning evidence. Should be damning evidence that Jesus is not the Son of God. Because it specifically says, no one has ever seen God. Crystal clear. Undeniable verse. If you were to deny that verse, you're deluded. Because it specifically says, no one has ever seen God. There's no room for debate. The next verse, John 3, verse 2. He came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God. You are a teacher who has come from God. Why didn't he say, you are God? Or you are the Son of God? Or why didn't Jesus scold him and say, no, wait a minute, I am the Son of God. Well, what are you saying here, that I am sent from God? No, I am the Son of God. He didn't say that. He left it as it is. And he himself, Jesus, in his own words said, I was sent by God. If he was God, wouldn't he have said, I am God? Or I am Son of God? Or I am the mighty God? Or you need to go through me to gain salvation? Or I died for your sin? He never said any of that. He referred to himself as the Son of God, and we'll be discussing that in this video. I'm going to be discussing that in detail. Continuing on. He referred to himself as the Son of God, but he also called the people sons of God. He also said, you are all sons of God. Therefore, he's not implying that he is the one and only begotten Son, or the true Son, literal Son, but he is using it as a metaphor, as in a relation with God, that God is like your father, like your parent, but not literally the Son of God, because if it was true, he wouldn't have said that you are all sons of God. Now, I am your son, I am the Son of God, and you are the Son of God. That's what he says. We'll be discussing that. We'll discuss this topic because I know the Christians are going to say, no, wait a minute. He said, I am the begotten Son. Or he said, I am the Son. We're going to discuss it. Let's continue on. John 4, verse 19. A lady says to Jesus, Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Again, further proving what Islam says, what Quran says, which is that Jesus is a prophet. He heard her say that. She's speaking to him. He did not condemn her. He did not refute her. He did not rebuke her. He accepted the title prophet. John 4, verse 49. My food, said Jesus, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Again, he's saying that he was sent by God. If he was God, it wouldn't make sense for him to say, the one who sent me. He should just say, I'm coming down on my own accord. I am God. But he said, I am doing the work of the one who sent me, indicating that he is not one and the same with God, or that he is not himself God, but God is someone else who sent him. John 4, verse 44. Now Jesus himself pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own town. Now listen again what I just said. Jesus himself pointed out that a prophet, now Jesus is referring to himself as a prophet, has no honor in his own town. Further proving what Islam says, that Jesus is a prophet. He himself just said and pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own town. And that context of the verse was when the people didn't want him in the town. They wanted to expel him, and they were debating him. And he pointed to himself and pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his own town. John 5, verse 30 says, By myself I can do nothing. This is Jesus speaking. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just. For I seek not to please myself, but the one who sent me. Again, proving that Jesus and God are not one and the same, but Jesus was sent and sent by God, not that he is God, proving that they are not one and the same, because Jesus specifically said, I do not do to please myself, but the one who sent me, indicating they're two different beings. John 6, verse 38. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of the one who sent me. Again, further proof. Jesus and God are not one and the same. Matthew 4, verse 9. All this I will give you, he said, if you bow down and worship me. Now, this is the devil speaking. This is the devil in the mountain tempting Jesus to worship him. It says, all this I will give you, he said, if you bow down and worship me. Now I ask the Christians, does it make sense that that Satan would ask God, who created him from the first place, he created everything, to worship him? Is it logical that Satan, who is created by God, a creation, would ask the Creator to worship him? Is it logical? I don't think that any Christian will say that's logical. One final verse to prove my point. Then I will show a few more verses, and then we'll get to the subject that I said we'll discuss. This is in John. This is damning evidence. This is, to me, seems to be the most damning evidence, besides the other verse that I mentioned, which was extremely damning. This one is just as damning, if not more. John 14, verse 28. Jesus says, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and unto my God and your God. Now, does it make sense that God would refer to him, would claim that he has a God? God has a God? How in the world can that be? I'll read the verse again. This is, again, John 14, verse 28. I ascend unto my Father and your Father. Now, listen, he's saying my Father and your Father. So he's saying that God is not just his Father, it's everybody's Father, according to the language of the Bible. Not literally Father, but like your Father. Because if God was literally our Father, then we'd all be gods, and we'd all have power that is unstoppable. We would all be many little incarnates of God with supreme power, but we know we don't. So the language of the Bible calling God your Father, if that's truly authentic, then he probably isn't, but if it was, and for the sake of the argument, he's referring to, not literally, but metaphorically, like your father, like a parent. And the further proof of that is, to my God and your God. Does it make sense for God to call someone else God, or to say that he has a God? Or if Jesus was the Son of God, then who is his God? If you say that the Father and the Son are one and the same, and they're equals in power and might, and they're equal in authority and holiness, how can God have a God? It doesn't make any sense. I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and unto my God and your God. How in the world can God have a God? Now, the last few verses before we end. Regarding the Trinity, regarding the concept of God, of Jesus dying for sins, the concept of the crucifixion, discredited and disproved through Jesus' own words. Matthew 5, verse 22. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. If Jesus died for sins, then why is he telling people that if you so much as call somebody you fool, you will be punished in the fire of hell? If he died for sins, remember, you say that he died for sins, then why is he threatening people that if you do not obey, and if you do this mistake, you will be punished in hell? What's the point of the crucifixion if he's not going to take the sin? And he clearly said he's not going to take it in that verse. Next verse, Matthew 6, verse 18. So that it will not be known to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father. Listen, but only to your Father who is unseen. Unseen. Your Father who sees what you do in secret. Unseen? I thought you said Jesus is seen. Your Father, he's referring to God as everybody's Father. So the term Father has definitely been forged by the writer, or it's not to be taken literally. Next verse, Matthew 15, verse 24. For people who claim that Jesus was sent for all of mankind, well, according to Jesus' own words, he wasn't. He said, he answered, I was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. He did not say I was sent to all of mankind. He said, I was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. Now, the Christians aren't going to be enraged by what I said, and are probably biting their fingers off in rage. What their refutation would be, they would say that there are verses that Jesus called himself the Son of God. And yes, there are. I actually read them. So you see that I'm not biased. I could have just left the video just like that and ended it. So I'm taking the two sides. Unlike the bigots who cherry pick, I'm not doing that. I'm taking it as it is, everything, to get a comprehensive understanding of the verses in honesty. There are some verses, before I used to not know that it says that, because a lot of Muslim apologetics and debaters, they say it doesn't exist. But I read that it says that Jesus himself referred to himself as the Son, or as the Son of God, in the Bible. If I recall correctly, it said that. But he never referred to himself as God, the ultimate high, powerful God. Never, never, ever. He never said that he died for sins. He himself never claimed, notice what I'm saying, he himself never claimed that he died for sins. He never claimed from as far as I read up to this point, Now, I just remember that there's, I think toward the end, that he says that he will die and he will be crucified, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure if it was him saying it or if it was someone else talking. I cannot recall fully. So I'm not going to say that he himself didn't say he's going to die for sins in the Bible, although the verses that I just showed contradicts that. So there's a contradiction. So even if he said it or not, there's a contradiction. So clearly, the verses in the Bible has been tampered with. And the point of him referring to himself as the Son, or as the Son of God, well, he called everybody the sons of God. He said, "You are all the Son of God." And the Old Testament calls people the Son of God multiple times. The Old Testament calls David the Son of God. It calls Jacob the Son of God. It refers to sons of God by the dozens. In Exodus 4, verse 22 through 23, says, And you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, Let my son go, that he may serve me. So there are countless verses in the Old Testament and in the New Testament which claims that multiple prophets are the sons of God. And there's claims in the New Testament that Jesus himself referred to himself as the Son of God, and he called everybody the Son of God. And clearly that these verses have been forged, because it's impossible. It cannot possibly be that Jesus is the Son of God, or that Israel, David, or Jacob, or everybody is the Son of God, because we would all be powerful, mighty beings. And obviously nobody is. We all die, we all get sick, we all have needs. Jesus himself prayed to God. He fell on his face and prayed. I asked the Christians, what people on earth today fall on their face and pray? Is it the Jews? Is it the Hindus? Maybe the Buddhists? The atheists? There's only one people, and they start with the letter M. The Muslims. Nobody else falls on their face and prays, except for the Muslims. Exactly the same method as Jesus, peace be upon him, prayed. Now, the most damning proof should be the fact that no single prophet ever worshipped Jesus. They never mentioned Jesus by name. They never hinted at him that he is a God, or that he is the Son of God, or that you need to go through him to gain salvation. They never hinted at the Trinity. Did Abraham worship Jesus? Did Abraham mention Jesus? Did Abraham hint at Jesus? Did Abraham say that God has a son? Did Abraham say that God will have a son in the future? Did he hint at the Trinity concept? Didn't they all say God is one? Except for the verses that call certain prophets sons of God, which is a forgery. It must be, it has to be, because if they were truly sons of God, they would be all powerful and almighty. And they all had limitations, and they all died. They all got sick. Jesus himself had sickness, or he had limitations. And then the point of the Jesus coming back to life, that he was crucified and he came back to life. First of all, you can't prove that. You don't have proof to prove that. You cannot prove it. You can make the claim, and they would say that there are witnesses, there is historical evidence to prove it. No, there isn't. Actually, there is no historical evidence. The historical evidence is the Bible. That's the reference. Or Christian sources. There's no independent, non-Christian sources that claims that Jesus came back to life. What's the non-Christian sources? Show us the sources. Everything that they've shown are all biased Christian sources. They are not independent sources. And even if it was true that he came back to life, it doesn't matter. He's not the first guy to come back to life from the prophets. There are many prophets before him who came back to life. Who cares? It doesn't prove anything. That doesn't prove that he died for sins. Now, I don't deny that the crucifixion occurred. Islam says that it happened, but it wasn't Jesus who was crucified. And you cannot prove it was. And even if it was, that doesn't prove that he's God, and doesn't prove he's the Son of God. Secondly, that if it was true that he is God and he died for sin, and he cannot forgive sins unless he kills himself to forgive sin, then I ask, who died for Jonah, the prophet who was swallowed by the whale when he disobeyed God, and God punished him by letting the whale swallow him? Who died for his sin? Who died for his sin? Jesus did not come at that point. Who died for Moses' sin when he killed the man in Egypt? Who died for all the people who came before Jesus' sin? Why didn't Abraham worship Jesus? Why didn't Isaac and Ismail and Jacob and Moses and Noah and Jonah? Why didn't they mention, even hint at the concept of the Trinity, or that God needs to die to forgive sins? Why didn't they even hint at it? Why didn't they say that God has a son, or even hint at that? Why didn't they mention the term Jesus or his name, or that he would come? Now, I debated this topic with a Christian, and he said that Isaiah did. Isaiah hinted at the fact that Jesus will come, that he will have a son, that God will have a son. You've given me one prophet out of a dozen? I mean, come on. What a joke, Yanni. If anybody was to make the claim, if anyone was to make the claim, it should have been Abraham, because he's the father of all prophets, the father of all religion, the first of all messengers. If it was true, he would have been the first to worship Jesus, or hint at Jesus, or hint at the Trinity, or even hint that God has a son, and he didn't. That should be enough reason for anyone to deny the fact that Jesus is not the Son of God. I conclude with, may the peace and blessings be on the Prophet Muhammad, and on all those who follow him until the last day. And I conclude with, may the peace and blessings be on the Prophet Jesus, whose real name is not Jesus, by the way. That's a Greek name. The Bible is not even recorded in the original language of Jesus. So this is really not even a debate. Your text is not even recorded in Jesus' mother tongue, and yet you have enough nerve to debate us. It's shameful. And as I said, I don't have an issue with Christians. I mainly do these videos to get back at the bigots. I want to stick it to them. I want to hit them with something that would piss the hell out of them. And obviously, I don't really want to insult and make the tolerant Christians angry or sad from these videos. I don't like to do that, because I know how it feels. But I want them to think. I want them to think about what I say, and to think critically, with an open mind, without bias. But the main reason I make these videos are to stick it to the bigots. I really want to stick it to them and really let them have it. So when I do things like this, it pisses the hell out of them. And that's what I want to do, because they have insulted Islam for far too long. They put down our religion. They insulted our prophets. Our Prophet Muhammad made insults, and they harass us and they insult us. It's only getting worse. So I think it's time for me to stick it to them back. And I would like the tolerant Christians to think critically of what I say without bias. If you can refute my points logically, without stupid, ridiculous refutation, then I would like to hear it. And I will address them in the next video. I hope that tolerant Christians were not seriously offended by what I say, but I'm just trying to show you and prove to you that Jesus is not the Son of God based on your own verses. And I just proved it. And for the bigots, I like to stick it to you. صلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.